Good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. Now we want to move on to Unit 1, which is loss management, the practice and its origin. I urge you all to open your modules on page 14 so that we move together. The first port of call is for us to define what is loss management. But before we define loss management, otherwise it is very important for us to give the basic definitions of the word loss. The first definition which is given in our module is the state or occurrence of disadvantage, detriment or deprivation from failure to keep, have or get something, as in loss of production or machine time. The second definition is the state of being deprived or being without something that one has had before the occurrence of the depriving event, as in losing an item to thieves. It might also mean death or the fact of being dead, that is loss of life. It might also mean failure to meet targets, loss of opportunities, breakdown of operations, loss of production. So basically, what we are talking about in terms of loss is we are looking at a situation whereby an individual, an organization, a state lose its assets, lose something of value. It's actually at a disadvantaged position. Just like when you are walking in town and then you encounter a pickpocketer who steal your wallet, you could have actually lost your money. Just like when an organization, various organizations which are being robbed, they are losing their monies, their valuables. Then, so what we need to understand is that loss management is a very, very important function. Why? Because whatever we do in an organization at an individual level, we try by all means to prevent losses. At individual level, the reason why you would want to keep your monies at the bank, you would want actually to put some precast walls around your homestead. You would want to put some burglar bars, some screen doors at your homestead, is to make sure that you prevent losses. At an organizational level, quite a number of strategies actually put in place to prevent losses. At state or national level, you would find out the armies, the police are always patrolling our borders to make sure that we are not attacked by external forces. Let's move on to the purpose of this module. Loss management is designed to develop and provide systems which can satisfy individual and organization needs for personal and asset security and safety, and to avoid potential or actual occurrence of whatever type of damage or injury or loss of assets or life. You'll find out that before these various organizations actually came into being, loss management was always there. It's as good as the moment people started existing, people started to apply quite a number of loss management principles in order to protect themselves, in order to protect their animals, in order to protect their wealth, to protect their food from adversaries. So loss management is not actually a new concept. It's a concept which has been there for years and has been in practice for years. But the only difference now is that it is now being practiced as a profession. So let's now look at the origin and the growth of loss management. Under this one, we're going to look at it from the socio-economic evolution. You will find out that Aristotle is reported to have said, if you would want to understand anything, observe its beginning and its development. The practice of loss management is as old as the narrations of the Bible and the socio-economic evolution. The functions of loss management practitioners in modern society mirrors the functions of a shepherd as spelled out in the Bible. So, as being explained in this particular module, you will find out that whatever the loss management practitioners are doing today, they are just doing what exactly is spelled out in the Bible, or resembles the functions of a shepherd as spelled out in the Bible. Some of the duties of a shepherd include seeking and finding stray sheep. In today's scenario, we are looking at investigations, or that constitutes investigations. Counting the sheep in the evening as they entered the fold, that's part of what we call risk management in today's language. Building permanent sheepfolds, that's what we refer today as security. In fact, we actually have a module on physical security systems design, where we design how to protect the various assets through physical security systems. And lastly, protecting sheep from thieves and wild animals, which also constitutes security. You will find out that even during those biblical eras, the armies were also involved in protection of the king's dwellings. So that aspect of the protection of the master in these dwellings was the preoccupation of people referred to as the night watchmen, which in today's environment refers to these security details, security guards who actually protect individual homesteads, companies' premises, as well as government premises during both the day and night from all forms of threats. Then we'll look at human settlements and loss control. Settlements, locality or a populated place are general terms used in geography, statistics, archaeology, landscape, history, and other subjects of a permanent or temporal place in which people live or have lived as a community without being specific as to size, population, or importance. That's a settlement. A community, on the other hand, is a large group of people settling at a specific place, sharing common values, and identifying themselves as belonging to a group. A settlement, therefore, can range in size from a small number of dwellings grouped together to the largest of cities within urbanized areas. So you'll find that these settlements, they also needed protection and security of their assets and maintenance of order, peace, and stability. Just like today, you'll find out that any particular settlement requires to be protected from criminals, requires to live in harmony. There is need for the maintenance of peace and order. And that's the reason why we have got police officers to do this particular task, as mandated in the Constitution, as they are mandated under section, as they are mandated in the Constitution. Let's now look at individuals, communities, and state security. From an individual perspective, you will find out that just like what I've already highlighted in my introductory remarks, that as individuals, we need protection. We need protection to be protected from criminals, to be protected from harsh environments. As individuals, we have got our properties. For instance, at household levels, like what I've already highlighted, as a household, you have got your furnitures, you have got your children, you have got your valuables in the form of jewelry and so forth. You need protection. And again, these assets that you own, they need protection to prevent loss. Communities, like what I've already highlighted again, in certain communities, besides the household property which are owned by individuals, there are also some properties which are owned by communities. For instance, you might have a dam in a community, you might have a borehole in a community, you might have schools in a community. Those properties are community owned and they need to be protected so that we prevent loss. And loss to a dam, a loss to a community dam, to a community borehole will result in the suffering of the whole community. So all these things, they need to be protected. In terms of communities, we also have what we call business communities. Business communities, we'll be talking of various organizations, and these organizations, they own property. They own a number of assets. There are also people within those organizations which needs to be protected from various threats such as injury, such as death. They need to be protected. Then lastly, we'll talk about state security. State security, we are now talking about the protection of a nation. It might also be referred to as national security. And state security, it includes the state and the public entities like the parastatals. The state security is actually very, very important. Why? Because for all individuals, for all organizations, or for all communities to feel safe, there is need for the state, for the government to guarantee state security through various initiatives such as the protection of our borders, various initiatives such as gathering of intelligence on both internal and external aggressors, dealing with the terrorist activities. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot talk of individual security, we cannot talk of community security without talking about state security. There is no point whereby you enjoy a secure environment as an individual, as a community, as a business organization, if there is war in a country. For instance, in Ukraine, there is no point individuals in Ukraine can talk of individual security. There are no longer property rights in that kind of environment. Yes, the property rights are there, but they are violated day in, day out, left, right, and center. Various business communities, various businesses are losing their assets, are losing their hard-earned incomes in just a matter of seconds. Why? Because there is no state security. So, as loss control managers, we should understand that all our activities are supposed to be complemented by state security so that we'll actually enjoy a safe and secure environment. We'll then look at industrialization and work specialization. You'll find out that, remember, we are still on the evolution of loss management. Issues to do with industrialization actually brought in a number of challenges, a number of risks. Through industrialization, you'll find out that various factories were built, which actually came up with both threats and opportunities. Threats in the form of some criminals willing to steal various assets of the organization, the raw materials, the finished goods, and everything. It also came up with opportunities in the event that people, a large number of various industries, then employed a large number of people. So you will find out that at the same time, whilst the new challenges in the form of theft, in the form of people willing to steal raw materials, finished goods, threats such as fire came in, threats such as robberies came in, with all those other opportunities, you will find out that the industrialist then realized that it's also important to have the loss control department or a loss control function within their organizations. If we can invoke other authors such as Henry Fayol, you'll find out that Henry Fayol, during that period of industrialization, that's when he came up with management functions, and under those management functions, he identified security as an important management function whose major objective was the protection of the company's assets, the company's wealth, the protection of the employees of the organization. So industrialization, as we are speaking, brought in both opportunities in the form of job creation, in the form of increased output, in the form of new products in the market, but it also brought in new challenges in the form of security threats. But at the same time, it also gave birth to the loss control management function or to the security function. Then we want now to move on to the concepts and the theories. Concepts and the theories of loss management. Firstly, we're going to look at private property, wealthy, and inequalities. Right. So, under private property or under property ownership, you find out that property ownership is divided into two. We have got a private property, which is a property which is owned by individuals, by private organizations. We also have public property, which are properties which are owned by the government, by the public utilities such as parastatals. But the issue of private property actually led to what we call inequalities. Inequalities, we are talking about an even distribution of wealth amongst the citizens of a nation or amongst the people in a community. Under this concept of private property, ownership, and inequality, I'm tempted to invoke other theorists such as the Marxist theory. According to Marxist, he actually said the major reason why we have got crimes, the major reason why we ended up having losses is because of the issue of private ownership of property, whereby we've got people who are referred to have the haves or the bourgeoisie, people who own the factors of production. On the other hand, we've got the have-nots, which are also referred to as the proletariat, people who are poor. So the have-nots are the ones who work for the haves. So the haves or the bourgeoisie are the people who own factors of production, and these are the people who are rich, who are wealthy. The have-nots, in most cases, constitutes the workers. And the reason why we end up actually having some losses here there is because the have-nots will be tempted to steal, will be tempted to commit crimes against the haves in a way to compensate for the wealthy which they do not have but are in the hands of the haves or the rich. So where do loss control managers come in? As loss control managers and the staff which falls under our purview, we then come in to protect the interest of the haves or to protect the wealthy of the haves. That's the reason why you find loss control managers actually enforcing the laws to protect the property of the haves. These laws are being enforced against the have-nots. The duties of the loss control managers and their staff is to apprehend the have-nots who could have tried to steal or to cause loss to the haves or to the rich, in simple terms. So as the loss control managers and our staff, we stand in between the haves and the have-nots, and our major role is to prevent the have-nots from stealing or causing loss to the haves' property. In terms of property ownership, we want now to move on to property ownership. You'll find out that property ownership is actually a very, very important concept. Why? Because without the property ownership, we could not actually talk about issues which would not actually talk about losses. For you to say you have lost something, you only lost what you previously owned. So in terms of property ownership, you'll find out there are quite a number of theories in terms of property ownership. Some of these theories in terms of property ownership, we have actually talked about some of the issues. That is, property ownership is divided into private ownership and public ownership. Private ownership, we're talking about those properties which are owned by the individuals, the families, and the corporations. Public ownership, we're talking about those properties which are owned by the state and the public entities. So, theories of property ownership. How do one become an owner of a particular property? There are quite a number of theories, which include ownership by occupation, by conquest, by labor, by natural rights, and by the law. In terms of ownership by occupation or conquest, we are actually talking about a situation whereby one uses force to get a particular property and use the same force again to prevent other people from reclaiming that kind of property from him. So in that particular aspect, you'll find out that this method of gaining ownership of property is no longer applicable in today's world. The second theory in terms of property ownership is that of labor, is the labor theory, whereby one will become an owner of property if he or she has applied his mind and labor to add value to that particular property. This one is actually a little bit absurd way of property ownership. Why? Because, for instance, nowadays, for you to have a piece of land, you actually do not need to labor, but you might just need to apply for that piece of land through the Ministry of Lands and Agriculture. And then after application, you then pay for that particular land. So in this case, there is no application of labor and application of brains to get that, but it is just through exchange of the land. You get the land and then you give out money. Then we'll then move on to the natural rights theory. The natural rights theory actually poses that the legal explanation of the natural rights theory is that property ownership exists because the law says it shall exist. Then we have the delegated responsibility and the agency theory of ownership. This delegated responsibility and agency theory actually help us to explain property ownership within various organizations, whereby the principals or the shareholders, being the owners of property, being the owners of businesses, delegates executives, company executives, to run the organization on their behalf, to keep the properties, the assets of the organization on their behalf. The agency theory also helps us to explain the relationship between the loss control department and the company. The various companies actually give the power and the rights to protect the company's assets to the loss control manager and his staff. So in this way, the loss control manager and his staff will be acting as an agent of the company, protecting the assets of the organization on behalf of the company. Then we'll move on to the theory of firm. Industrialization brought in various firms which owns various properties. But the major aim of the firm or whatever company is to avoid losses and maximize profits. The theory of the firm's profit maximization assertion is essential in carrying out a risk assessment, threat analysis, and developing appropriate loss management systems. So, with the firm theory, we actually say the major aim is to avoid losses and to maximize profits. Through this theory, that is the reason why, as loss control managers, we actually do risk assessment. We actually conduct security surveys. We actually conduct threat analysis and then develop various security and loss control controls or loss control strategies to prevent losses or to mitigate losses. We also have the management behavior theory. The management behavior theory, it is actually a theory which actually states that management behavior, it is actually a theory which explains the relationship between the management and the shareholders. The managers, in most cases, have got one big mission: to increase productivity, to increase the sales, and then make sure that the profits are actually maximized so that they will be able to get more money out of the organization at the end of the day. Whereas the interest of the shareholders is to maximize profits. So you will find out that in most cases, that is the reason why we as loss control managers, we are then called in. Why? Because there is always a conflict of interest. The shareholders wants to increase its returns on investments, that is profits. Whilst the management, yes, they might also want to increase returns on investment, but they want their basic interest is to increase their income at the end of the day. So loss control managers, we come in to make sure that there is a balance of these interests, to make sure that the management of the organization, the employees of the organization, do not actually end up stealing from the organization, depriving the organization of its assets. Actually, that marks the end of our lecture today. Any questions, you can actually send some audios whereby you'll be asking for clarifications. You can even write some of your questions, text some of your questions, so that we'll be able to address them. So today, what we have done, we have covered, we managed to define loss, whereby we actually said a loss is a situation whereby one is deprived of an asset or a value or anything of value which he was previously his own. Then we looked at loss management, which we defined as all measures or initiatives which are put in place to protect the assets of individuals, of organizations, of communities, of the state from various threats. Then we also looked at the origin of the loss management function, which we said, yeah, it actually originated from the early stages of life. That is the moment a human being came into existence, that's when the loss control activities also began. Early people, we actually said they were actually very much concerned about their livelihoods. They were also concerned about the protection of their livestock and everything. But that then changed as the world actually progresses through industrialization, whereby new threats emerged, whereby various opportunities also emerged, which also gave birth to the loss control management function. We also looked at how the interaction or the relationship between loss control and other disciplines, such as human resources, such as the production, such as ICT, and we actually noted that, yeah, there is actually a close nexus between the loss management function with those departments. And we also talked about the nexus between loss management profession with other disciplines such as accounting, such as psychology, law, and others. We actually covered that. Then lastly, we looked at property ownership, which we said property ownership is actually the major reason why we are required as loss control managers to come in. If there was no ownership of property, there was no need for any forms of protection. But because property is owned by individuals, property is owned by the government, definitely there is need for the protection of those properties so that the owners of the properties will continue to own their property and not lose them in the long run. I thank you.